Today's guest is a very special case study of building yourself up. He moved to the US with just $100 in his wallet. 5 years later, he got a job, he got a car, he got a university degree, and he built himself up with nobody but himself to rely on. He also happens to know a lot about sociology, which he studied in university. It's a great pleasure to have another close friend on the podcast, an individual I have great respect for. This episode is with Josiah Horton. If you were to give a 10-word definition to sociology, what would you frame that as?
I would frame it as, I would say, an overview look at social problems and the reasons why they happen.
So then, instead of looking at problems from a psychology point of view, which is how somebody interacts from their inner self, right?
Yeah.
You look at how different groups of people from different backgrounds, different races, different genders, different economic classes, how they interact with each other and what the reasoning behind is, something like that.
We are providing the data for politicians or people who can make change to know what changes need to be made.
How did you get into sociology in the first place?
It's really strange. So I originally wasn't even sure that I wanted to go to university. I was planning to just work my way up through the ladder somewhere. And then I had the opportunity, thanks to financial aid from the government, to go and have my tuition paid for. And so from there, it was like, okay, having a bachelor's degree generally, on average, gives you like $30K a year more to make in the US. And so if this is where I'm going to be living, at least for now, and I'm getting the school side of it for free, I might as well go do that because it's going to increase my long-term outcomes. So it was like, okay, this is a smart financial decision. And I actually did my first year at a community college, which is significantly cheaper than a regular college. And so in the US track, you have to do a lot of your general education credits. And so I'm going to do my general education credits there for cheap. And then I'm going to do my specific classes that require more intensive education at the 4-year degree. So one of the primary reasons was financial. And then from sociology, I did my year at community college. I went to Ball State for journalism initially because I love football. I thought sports journalism would be cool. But then the journalistic style was very limited in how you can do it, right? You have to be very exact. And then oftentimes you have to write in specific ways. And it's not that I don't like to write in a neutral perspective, but I think there's a lot more interest in discovering what people's opinions are related to facts. And so you prioritize the facts, but people half the time don't make decisions based on facts themselves, but they make decisions based on their interpretations of facts and what they think the right thing is after that.
Yeah.
And so news was just a little bit bland for me at that point in what I could do. Also, the news industry is dying to a certain extent because newspapers are going out more and more in the States. Everything is becoming more digital. And so then the job opportunities are being more restricted. And so it's just not a field that's trending upwards, right?
Also, a lot of people are switching to watching podcasts, seeing the news not from official, like the BBC or I don't know what is the US equivalent of that, but going into people that they think they can trust and getting their view of the picture from them because they think it's less biased.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, news has become biased now. So you have Fox News, which leans right, and you have other news agencies which lean left, and there's several like that. And so then news isn't what it used to be. So if we look at news 100 years ago or something, right, that was people's main source of information. The difference is like you were saying, there's more access to information, and we live in an information age now.
Yeah, exactly.
And so the importance of news to know what's happening isn't as necessary, right? And so that's partially why it's failing, or just why the field's becoming smaller and more focused. So, I'm starting to realize some of these things, but at this point I'm 2 years into college and
what were you studying for the first 2 years?
First year I didn't have a specific major. The second year
it
was
so it works
journalism.
where you get like general. Oh, right. Okay.
Well,
And
I
then
didn't
you can
have to
switch
do it
another
that
one.
way. Yeah,
Makes
a lot
sense.
of people go to university right away and they don't necessarily commit right away, or they commit to something and they change. I think it's something like.
And in the US, it's not a problem to change. You don't lose years per se, right?
So this is where it depends, and this is why part of the reason why I ended up switching to sociology. So for the bachelor's degree that I went for at Ball State, you need 120 credits, credit hours, right? And so one class is generally 3 credits, and so the common track is you do 15 credit hours per semester, and so that's 30 credits a year times 4 years is 120, right?
Okay.
And so because you have to do the general education anyway, and because like over half of students change, I think it is, or like at least 40% of students change their major in their college career.
Wow.
Yep. Then at that point, it made sense to like not commit right away. And because I wasn't in the right institution to commit right away for being smart financially, right? So then when I get there with journalism, it's like, that's like a 60 credit program. So that takes up about over half of all your credits that you need to graduate. So you divide those classes up over 3 or 4 years, right? And so you take a different class every semester as you move from 100 level courses to 400. But that's like a major part of what you're doing. And so I was 2 years in, and it's very hard to switch to like a nursing major, which is like 80 credits. You could do it, for example, but then you're going to spend an extra year because you don't have the specific credits for a nursing degree because you haven't taken those classes.
Right. And
so the process is then, okay, I have to sit down and I say, I have 60 credits left. I have tier 2 requirements. So let's say you take 15 credits off the table from general education requirements. And so then really you only have 45 credits left to switch to another major, which if it's 60 credits means that those extra 15 I have to take another semester for.
Right.
And then that's more money out of pocket, right?
Yeah.
And with a bachelor's degree, I mean, unless you're going into a specific field like nursing or engineering or architecture,
medicine, law.
Yeah, medicine, law, and even law, like you would go pre-law and then to law school, right?
Yeah.
With those, it's like, okay, the specific degree matters. But when you're taking a humanities course or humanities degree, like sociology or like English, to a lesser extent psychology, but also to an extent with psychology, or even if you're a language major, right? When you're looking at those, then you're learning certain skills, right? And so then it's all about you get the degree and then you sell your skill set, right? So I was looking at the list of majors that were like 45 credits or less because I didn't want to spend an extra year.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But I still wanted to complete my degree because you're halfway through. You might as well finish. It doesn't make sense to drop out. And so sociology was like 39 credits. I'd already taken a couple sociology classes, so I knew I was interested. And the first sociology class you usually take is theory. And so theory looks at 3 or 4 major ones. You have functionalism, conflict theory, and you have symbolic interactionism. And those were terms generally coined by 3 major guys in like, I think it was the 1900s, maybe dipping into the 1800s. I think Durkheim was in 1865, maybe. I'd have to check that year again. But I looked at those, and the interesting thing about those is like they're looking generally at society from a macro perspective and how it functions, but they have different analogies for how and different things that they focus on for why we have social structures the way they do. And a lot of those end up having value conversations or value-laden conversations that are close to philosophy. My dad has a PhD in religious philosophy. And so when I was growing up, I got a lot of philosophical and value-laden conversations that were interesting to me. So sociology for me oftentimes, although you would never put this in a definition, is having value-laden conversations because we're getting these facts. But like I said, people most oftentimes don't make decisions off of just facts.
Yeah.
it's how they interpret them.
Yeah.
And so it was this really interesting intersection of like, I have some philosophical basis, and a philosophy degree doesn't always do a whole lot. Usually is a stepping stone to what it feels like to me more of an extent than sociology, just because there's less obvious career paths that you can go into. And so I have this unique opportunity where I can have what I like to call applied philosophy here, where I'm learning how the techniques to research social problems that are having, and then having conversations about the values that are driving those.
I quite like this. So sociology is like applied philosophy.
Yeah.
Would you say that?
I don't think anybody else would say that, but that's the way I like to look at it. And oftentimes I think people are very blind to the values they put on things in just casual conversation and the way that they use language. Like whether just saying whether something is good or something is bad implies that implicitly there's something that's better than another. Yeah. And that derives off of a value basis of what do I value more? Do I value time or money or energy or rest, right? Family or work. And these are all bases, but just to start with even determining what social problems we prioritize and look at has to operate off of a value hierarchy of what we think is important for society. And so it's this interesting loop where you have these decisions that we make on what we should research, and then we get the research, and then we decide what else to research based on the outcomes of that research, right?
What are some of perhaps surprising or most interesting findings from research that you come across being a sociology bachelor?
Trying to think. I'm not super interested in the diversity, equity, and inclusion range just because I'm a more theoretical person in terms of I really liked the theory stuff. But I think one of the exciting things that I saw was like the impact of diversity, and it actually is pretty intuitive. I don't necessarily have statistics off the top of my head, but like
the general direction.
In business, having diversity is really good because it's unique idea generation. And we were talking about a little bit about this earlier in your businessman. So this is related to you in a lot of ways. But the more ideas that we can have, the more we can solve social problems. And having that in government levels, or even having that in higher business levels, or advertising or marketing, right, means that you can appeal to more people and that we can create new ways. So like, okay, Americans wouldn't know how good public transport is unless they go to Europe where public transport is good. And so like, I'm a big lobbyer of the public transportation system and making it better.
I would even say, not only more ideas, but more perspectives are very, very useful when it comes to making some kind of decisions on marketing, business, policy, and so on. So
that was one of the most interesting like findings that I thought was like, okay, wow, this could make a real impact in the future. And then I've seen, because I've been in several different businesses since then, mostly related to the food industry. And I've seen the impact of like during periods where we're more diverse and less diverse, and how that allows more people to feel comfortable or like unlock different parts of themselves that they didn't realize before. And it helps you become more open-minded. And the more open-minded a person is, the more as far as I've experienced, the more successful they can be, because you're not close to the ways of doing things, because society is constantly moving forward. And now more so than ever, we're moving forward, right? So you have to be ready to embrace the new thing that's coming or figure out how to adapt to it. Like we saw this in 2008 with the release of the iPhone and technology going to a new level. And then you see this with AI now. And even when we face challenges like COVID, it's like, okay, you have to be ready to face these things. And that means that you have to develop new ways to deal with it. But so one of them is diversity equals more ideas, more perspectives, better results. Any others? You told me a very interesting one about what is a determinator of financial success coming out of university. Remind me briefly. on it.
Was it something else where one of the biggest determinators of economic success of somebody graduating high school or university is not so much their like grades or their academic ability or their networking, but it's actually having a family that consists of two parents in their household?
Yeah.
Is that the case?
Yeah. Sorry, I was thrown off because you were specifically university. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So is it school then?
Yeah. It's so like
school,
once you graduate high school or secondary school for people in the UK or wherever, right? Because that's a more predominant model throughout the world.
That was a very interesting one for me because I wouldn't think it would be grades because that would, just from my experience, that's just not the case.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I would really expect this to be something like work ethic or how much experience you had with certain jobs before you got like a job at 18. But why do you think it's the whole having two parents?
Yeah. So I think like oftentimes in a relationship, when relationships are successful, you have like a more masculine individual or a feminine individual.
Okay.
And like it's interesting in terms of rates, like of divorce rates, like homosexual men have the lowest divorce rates. They have like, I think it's like 15 or 20%. And then next is heterosexual couples, and then lesbian couples have a rate of like 70 to 80% end in divorce.
Interesting.
And so having, even in those relationships and partners, having a balance of, okay, you have what might be a more traditionally masculine figure and a more traditionally feminine figure means that you're helping different phases of a child's development, right? So you have a more emotional person that they can go to, and then you have a logical person, maybe in one sense, right? Or you have a person that's going to encourage responsibility, and a person that's going to encourage the fun in life. And so it's kind of like the diversity conversation. Like if you have just one person, they're only going to provide one lens and grow you in the things you know. But no two people are the same. And so if you have two people, then all of a sudden you have this new realm of opportunities and more support given to the child. If you're a single parent having to work all the time, you don't have that time to invest in your kid. And so now if you're sharing the load with somebody, now your partner can invest in your kid, and then you invest in your kid. And then the kid has more emotional development that they're allowed to do. They might have more access to things. You might have, again, back to idea generation on parenting styles, like one parenting style doesn't fit every kid. And so if you have people that can adapt to the different needs that the kids have or their interests, then all of a sudden that's going to help them a lot.
So it's like almost like emotional diversity in a sense, where the chances of parents having like different perspectives is obviously higher if there are two parents than if there's one. So the same what we were talking about earlier before, if there's a more diverse individual of group, like in a brainstorming kind of setting. So same thing, but times 18 years of a kid development. Yeah.
Well, I'm a super big believer in people learn from experience. And so just imagine you have two people that have 30 years of experience, or one person that has 30 years of experience to invest into a kid. And like 20 years of the minimum have not been spent with their partner. So now instead of only having 20 years of experience to pour into somebody, you have 40 years of experience from two different people.
Right.
And so now you can tell them about different parts about the world or the place that they grew up, and they probably have different jobs. And so then this kid can see two different careers and say, I like these parts about this one, and I like these parts about this one, and I don't like this. And so now they can make a better decision on their financial future.
And the way it transforms to financial future is the premise here that the more emotionally intellectual the child is, the better their like competing edge is when they start a career. Is that the idea?
Yeah, that's the general idea. Well, it's like, at the end of the day, like 80 to 90% of jobs, you have to work with people. If you don't have people skills, you can't be successful pretty much. And it's like, even outside of negotiating salaries with people, if you're not happy in a job, you're not going to perform as well. And so if you know how to interact with people, then all of a sudden, not only are you probably going to get better pay if you know how to negotiate, but now you have this whole aspect of, now I can enjoy my time, get to know my coworkers if you want. But at the very least, you have to do that to a baseline level in almost every career.
So then here's two reasons why people should care about something like sociology. Helps you understand why and how different groups of people from different backgrounds interact can help you make better maybe decisions on what your impact will be. If, for example, you raise a kid by yourself, or you decide to leave family, or similar, maybe like more statisticky outcomes that will come. What other things are there that you think are important, why people should care about sociology and maybe should look into it?
Yeah. I mean, the thing with sociology is it's so broad. And so that's why it's hard to talk about to people sometimes, because there's just such a wide range of things you can do in it. So you can use it to assess the sports field. You can do family. You can do religion. You can do crime. You can do more political things. You can do homelessness and poverty. There's sociology of deviance. So that's slightly different from crime because crime's more legal. And then you can focus on specific gender stuff across the whole thing. You can focus on different economic classes. It's literally like any social category that you could think or social institution that you could think of is something that you can investigate.
And how about you? What interests you the most in all of these?
So I really like, I kind of spoke before, I really like philosophy. I like sport. So how do different teams interact? What are strategies they use? I'm not majorly into business strategies all the time, but I do like to see how entrepreneurs think, because like oftentimes people think outside of the box, or they have to think outside of the box, but they live so differently. And so like, how does Steve Jobs or Elon Musk to an extent engage socially around them? And like the amount is way more minimal in terms of close interaction than some other careers, right? So those would be like three major things. And then a lot of times I also look at religion as well, because my dad is a PhD in religious philosophy. And so how are different religions interacting with each other, and what values are pulling out of those religions that are influencing society? Because something that I say often is like, okay, you have politics, right? Politics and kind of constructs the legal system. Well, all of people's laws are going back to the value hierarchy. You lobby for a law that coincides with what you believe is good or true, or should be for society. And should is a value indicating statement. And so really when people are voting democratically for a leader or for a policy, are lobbying for that, they're making that off of their value hierarchy. And so analyzing religion, despite maybe personal insights or desires to do that, looking at religion then says, okay, why are people choosing the values that they do, and what are common ones between these, and which ones are the most successful or creating the most success based on whatever metric you use, whether it's progress or whether it's community satisfaction or whatever, right? So like religion and sports and family, which is why like I know the statistic about the 2-parent households. Those are probably the big three.
The religion thing you said, I find very interesting. So in a way, is what you're saying that a lot of the laws that are made like in our world right now are quite heavily based on religion, given that people were very religious for the past 400 or 500 years. And so a lot of these values must have come off from what they thought was right, and what they thought was right was in different holy books, right?
Yeah, to an extent. Like I'm not going to say everybody's religious, because I think a lot of people would misinterpret what I would say, but everybody has a list of what they think is good. And then off the list of what they think is good, that's based on something. So is that personal success at the top? Is that I'm feeling happy, right? So that would be like hedonism is what we would refer to with that, right? And so everybody has that no matter whether you're religious or not. Religion is just a codified set of these values. And so like with Christianity, it's wider. So you might, because like you have progressive Christians and you have traditional Christians. And even then you have Catholics and Orthodox and evangelicals. And so all of those people have their hierarchies maybe slightly differently constructed, and it might influence them more or less on what they're doing. And like a progressive Christian might value diversity, equity, inclusion far more than a traditional Christian is, and probably opposed to, right? Or different things that people would classify with women's rights, like women's rights in Islam looks very different than women's rights in progressive Christianity, because a progressive Christian might support abortion, and traditional Christian probably wouldn't support abortion most of the time, right?
Interesting.
But these are big policy decisions that are informed by what they say is true. Right. And so then you have to look at their religious documents and why they say it's true. Right. But regardless, they say it's true because they're basing it off of X lifestyle that they view to be most successful or good for people to live. What's going to provide them with the best possible life or afterlife in some scenarios. Right.
It's very insightful. Cool. Yeah. And so you've been doing this for 4 years now, but this is not something that you at the moment are going to pursue professionally, right? So you do you want to talk a little bit about what you're doing and how you came to the US and that story?
Yeah. So I was born in Nashville, Tennessee, and I was reading a book, like everybody's story starts before they were born. So I could share that, but that's less than what I want to focus on. But for me, my birth was in Nashville, Tennessee, and I spent 4.5 years between America and Tennessee and Israel. And then we moved to Israel when I was 9, because my parents did tours there, for people who wanted to visit. And so then when we were 9, we had some immigration struggles. And so we moved to Cyprus, which, a lot of people listening to the podcast might know. Some people might not. It's a little island just south of Turkey in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea.
And that's where we met.
And so I spent my teenage years from 13 to 17 and a half with you, Maxim, in Cyprus. And it was a wonderful time. The problem is when you live overseas, you can't work, right? And unless you have a work visa or you're a citizen. And so then it was like my parents, their business or organization wasn't going to be able to necessarily provide me a position. And so then the next step is you go back to America and you have to start from nothing. And
you got to talk more about the way you went back to America, because it's one of the most inspiring stories that I have personally witnessed in real life. So correct me if I'm wrong. You just had a one-way ticket and like whatever cash you had in your wallet, and you just went there and figured it out without, I don't want to say without a plan because that sounds diminishing, but without guarantees. Is that right?
Yeah. So my mom's from Indiana, and my grandparents still live in the same place that she grew up in northern Indiana. And my mother's brother lives close to Indianapolis, which is the capital of Indiana. It's more in the center. It's about a 3-hour drive away. And so, I was sitting there, I was 17 and a half. I have 6 months left of school, and I'm like, how am I going to make money? Because, you don't want to live with mom and dad forever, or most people don't.
Excuse me.
At least, bless you. At least in the American model, that's generally what people don't do. And I was raised to be very independent by my mom and dad, partially helped by the fact that we lived overseas. So it was like, I need to do something, and I want to be able to earn money so I can do the things I want to do, whether it be travel or whether it be go bowling or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And so where's the only place that I can work and make money? The U.S., because I'm a U.S. citizen.
From a legal point of view, right?
From a legal point of view. Now, it's possible that I could have started my own business online or something, but I didn't have any capital to do that. I had zero capital. So then it's asking mom and dad for money, and they didn't have a lot. I come from a family of 6. And so you're always splitting the money between the kids.
Also, like 95% of online businesses fail, and the ones that succeed, the online scene is changing so quickly. You got to be really on top of things, competing with people from China. Good luck.
Yeah, exactly.
It's tough.
It's the saying, money makes money, right?
Yeah.
And so when I don't have the facilities to make a risky play, then you have to go with the safe option to an extent, which for me, the safe option was getting on a plane to go 2,500 miles across the Atlantic Ocean to be with people that I hadn't seen in 8 years. So
did your parents gift you the one-way ticket for your birthday? Was that the case? No,
actually. So my grandparents paid for me to come back to visit them for the holidays and then stay after that. So essentially, like, my parents had a falling out with or more so my dad than my mom, but they had a falling out with my grandparents and the people on my mom's side of the family.
Right.
And I never really knew my dad's side of the family. So the only people that I kind of could go to, or that's why we didn't talk to them. And it wasn't that we necessarily thought they were bad people. We weren't super friendly with them, but not antithesis. So, but there was really nobody else that I could go to stay with, or that would feel comfortable going to stay with. And so I kind of just took it on a chance, and we reached out to my uncle, and he and my aunt were very generous, and they were willing to let me stay with them without necessarily paying rent or things right away, so that I can get on my feet. And so my grandparents paid for the ticket for me to come back. I was invested in trying to make a career out of football, and I went for a trial while I was there right after Christmas. But football is like the 1% of the 1%. So you can still be a good player, or you can think you're a good player, and then you go and you don't get selected because it's just so competitive.
Yeah.
Especially in the States, it's hard to make money from football because there's just a whole lack of opportunity, and it's not to the same extent in the UK where you can play semi-pro and make a living.
Yeah.
So I got back, and it's like, well, I have no work experience outside of volunteering with my dad.
That's you at 18, right?
17 and a half.
17 and a half.
Almost 18.
Yeah.
And so what do you do with no work experience that you can necessarily prove? Well, you have to get just a job anywhere you can, or from somebody you know. So my aunt and uncle knew the operator of this Chick-fil-a, so that helped me get an interview. And then in their interview, I sold myself well enough, and I could work mornings, which like a lot of the fast food industry in America, they have the teenage labor force. And if high schools don't get out till 4 p.m., they're looking for morning workers half the time because a lot of like young adults don't want to work in that. And if you're older than that, you have a better job usually. So
interesting. Yeah, that makes sense, actually.
They were looking for morning workers. And so that's partially why I got hired. And so, yeah, the dining room was closed because it was right after COVID in 2021. And so I would just run the orders out. And my parents did raise me with a very intense work mindset of like always looking for somebody to help. We hosted a lot of people growing up via the tours. They would stay with us. And so I had a hospitality mindset of like, how can I serve you? Which is, I work at Chick-fil-a. So that's one of their core things. So there's this fast food job. It's focused on serving. And so I excel at doing that. It's serving my team members. So they told me always stay busy when you're not doing stuff or when you don't have anything to do. And so it's like, okay, you told me to fill the ice bin. I'm going to make sure that's filled. And then they gave me a different thing I could focus on and a different thing. And so I was staying with no rent. And so I was able to make a little bit, and to the point where a year and a half in, I was able to buy my first car. And part of that was because of like in financial aid, if you are an independent, you get more than a dependent. And the difference with that is dependents they have an expected family contribution. So like if you've lived with your parents in the States, or your parents live there and that's where you go on the weekends, they're expecting that they're going to be contributing money towards your education.
Right.
And so because my parents weren't living in the States, or their income was low enough, right? That meant that I had an expected family contribution of $0. And I was living in a place that wasn't my parents' home. So in theory, I should be paying rent, but my aunt and uncle are generous enough to let me not do that. But I don't qualify as a dependent with them because they're not contributing more than half of my needs, right?
Yeah.
Because ultimately I didn't have insurance through them. And I was getting most of my food from working at my fast food place because it gave me free food.
Oh, wow.
So like 2 out of my 3 meals a week were from there. So my aunt and uncle are only contributing like 20 to 40% of the food that I eat in a week. So that's below half. And they're not paying for my car insurance, and they're not necessarily giving me a car. I was able to learn how to drive a car with them. But all of those things meant that I was able to get enough to where it gave me like $600 back every semester after. So actually going to school gave me income. on top of me being able to make income from work.
I didn't know that US has such a program. It sounds like it's quite nice, right?
Yeah, it's financial aid, it's FAFSA, but most people don't get as much as I did because of the unique demographics of my salary and how I was staying with my aunt and uncle. Right. But the system works for people who either fall into getting lucky for it or work for it.
And that's a government program, right?
Yeah. So FAFSA is available for everybody to apply to. Everybody's encouraged to apply to it. And so everybody can do that. But like a lot of people get zero because if your parents make like $70K a year, then you're not going to qualify.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, exactly. So, or assuming that they're responsible.
Yes.
So the other problem is like I specifically chose to go to a state school. So Community College Ivy Tech is a state school, and that's about $30K cheaper a year than a private school. Mm-hmm. And so when I was looking, okay, what's going to work within my budgets and what I can potentially get between scholarships and government assistance. And so those were the options that I could do. And then because I had good grades, I got a little bit of extra money tacked on to help with some of that. So when you
got like paid for good grades?
Not exactly. Like, so financial aid, it's like you have the Robert Bell grant in Indiana. So that gives you like $6,900 or whatever, which is basically the cost of tuition for a semester. And then they have like things like the Frank O'Bannon Award, which has certain qualifications. Like maybe I think it's like if you're independent or it goes away if you get grades under 3.5 GPA. Mm-hmm. So it's more conditional, but you do have to have a minimum of that. Like I got $500 extra every semester put towards my tuition because I had a GPA of like 3.7 or higher.
Right.
And so for students who do that, there is extra. Now I went through all of that without even getting scholarships. And a lot of kids who are coming out of high school get scholarship opportunities that they can apply for, but you have to make an application and an essay and all the different things. And then different universities have different opportunities for that, which I was homeschooled. So I didn't necessarily have those opportunities for scholarships right away. So that's why I was mostly working off of government assistance.
So you got into working for Chick-fil-A when you were 17 and a half.
Yep.
And you stayed there for many years, that means, right?
So I actually stayed at that Chick-fil-A about 45 minutes from where I currently live for a year and a half because I did the community college for a year.
And then you stayed with the brand and just moved to a different location, right?
Not exactly. So I did that and then I was able to buy my car after doing that because when I wasn't at school, I was working. So I worked 20 to 40 hours a week. Like it was 20, then 30, then 40. I slowly moved up. And then when I went to Ball State, which is my second year of uni, I didn't have a job right away because I wanted to focus on school. I went from graduating high school as a class of 1 to then going to this Ivy Tech campus, which had like 1,200 people, but the class sizes were super small, like 13 to 20 per class. And this was new experiences for me because I haven't visited America in 8 years. And so I'm trying to adapt to the culture on top of trying to make money, on top of trying to do good in my schoolwork. And so I was just trying to adjust to all of a sudden now I'm at a school with 20,000 people and there's just a lot of people around me. And I've grown up where like there's certain people that come in, but I usually don't interact with more than 15 people during a week, right? So now I've interacted with a lot of people. They just come and go because they're on a tour or whatever, right? So then at that point, it's like I'm trying to adapt. And then in my second semester, so the spring of, it would have been 22, I got a job on campus. And that was just at like a burrito rolling joint. And it paid basically minimum wage, which in America isn't much to live on. And I got it through the school system, but like when you're making $8 an hour, you can't really do anything and it won't pay the bills outside of it. Now I was living in the dorms that year, so I had to take a loan out for that. So I didn't have the stress of having to pay rent. But I knew I didn't want to stay on that because I didn't want to be in debt. And so then looking at that, I was like, well, if I stay on campus, I can't make enough to live. And so now I need to change again. Mm-hmm. So I went into the summer and I got a really cheap house somewhere. It was a dump and the roommates fought all year long that I was there.
Oh no.
But it was like $200 cheaper than everything else. And so I was like, I'm going to make this work. And that summer I worked 2 jobs. I would get up in the morning and I'd work like 6 to 7 hours. And then I would have 30 minutes. I would go home real fast on the way to the other place. I would change in like 5 minutes, or I would leave the clothes in my car and I would go to my other job and I'd work another 8 hours.
And how long did you do that for?
Yeah, and I did that for 3 straight months because I wanted to have enough to give me a little bit of a safety blanket going into the fall. Because then once you start school, you're at school like 30 hours a week.
Yeah.
So, and you have to do homework after that. Well, you're on campus like 20, but still, that's a significant amount of time because of travel to and from. And so then after that, I went back to Muncie, like 2 hours south, because I went home with my mother and sisters who had moved back at that point. That way I could live for free again. And so then I moved back and I got a job at a place called Olive Garden, which is a restaurant, as a line cook, I was getting paid more than I was before. So it was like $15 an hour at that point. And so then I would go in the evenings, or I would go in like maybe one evening a week. And then I would work like 18 to 20 hours on the weekends. Mm-hmm. And so like I would be there for like 8 hours on Saturday and 8 hours on Sunday from soon after we opened all the way until close at 10:30. And I did that for a while then too. And that's how I did it. But at that point I was working enough that I was like burning out.
Yeah.
And so then going into my senior year, I was like, well, I have to figure out how to make my schedule work to where I can live a healthy life and like not fall asleep while I'm doing homework or something. Right.
Yeah. And
still pay the bills. So while I had been at the old Chick-fil-a, I had made it all the way up to assistant director. I actually started making $9.25 when I was 17 and a half, and I left that job making $15.
Yeah.
And I rose up like 3 levels of positions. And so I have this 1.5 years of experience from Chick-fil-a, and the benefit of Chick-fil-a is they're closed every Sunday. And so I know that when I get on Sunday, I have a complete rest day to myself. They're not going to ask me to come in, and I can take that to do homework or just rest. And so for a lifestyle choice, I chose to go to Chick-fil-a because it was basically the same wage. I actually ended up making $2 more. Because when I went there, they saw you have a 1.5 years experience and a year experience in leadership. We need a leader. And so we're going to put you straight into leadership.
Nice.
And so from that point, that allowed me through my last year, I ended up working like 38 hours a week.
On top of university.
On top of university. But also my first 2 years, I did like extra little classes or an extra, I did like extra 1 credits or something. And so that meant my last 2 years, I only had to take 4 classes instead of 5. So that saved me like 4 hours a week that I was able to then put into work. And so my school workload was less so that I could work and pay off my rent and whatever.
You said you chose Chick-fil-a not to work on a Sundays, but I know for a fact that you would go there on Sundays to help the business prepared for the upcoming week. So did that work out?
So that was very situational. There was only like 3 or 4 Sundays that I did that, like because we power wash the drive-through to make sure it looks clean and everything. And so if you're willing, they would let you, if you're willing and a leader, they would let you come in on Sunday and do power washing, and you do that for 3 or 4 hours, and then you can make some extra cash. But really that only happened like 4 or 5 times. And if I wanted to, I could decline it. So, yeah.
And can I talk about that they gave you a good offer to stay with them?
Yeah.
So
it's, I was there, and when I got hired, they put me as a team member because they're like, we have 6 levels of leadership, and we know you have leadership experience, but every Chick-fil-A is a little different, and we don't know where you're going to fit best at, or where we want you to fit best at. And so they put me on like the 3rd tier, so above team member. And then I went through 8-week training, which usually they would do that before, but because of the situation, they had me go there immediately. And so I went through this 8-week training on vision and values. So this specific Chick-fil-A is very focused on integrity being their major core value of like, okay, doing the right thing when nobody else is looking. And then you go through other ones like why versus what / how, and like relationships drive results. And
for a sociology graduate, that seems like stuff you more or less already had experience with.
Yeah, between sociology and growing up with my dad's philosophical concepts and me watching philosophical podcasts and things, that meant that I was like, oh, this lines up with everything that I'm doing. It's just putting names to things or labels that I haven't always had
feel
for it.
right for.
Exactly. So they looked at me. They looked at how I was already exhibiting a lot of those and how I understood those. And they were like, and my willingness to serve. I also just love Chick-fil-a as a company. Like the way they serve is incredible for a fast food place. It's unlike any other except for maybe Culver's, but they do it on a bigger scale. And so I was like, I love Chick-fil-a's model and how they do it and how they're focused on the guest and the people and inspiring people, right? Putting a smile on our face. That's our main goal. And so they saw my passion for that. They saw my passion for vision and values. And so they were like, you have all the technical skills, which anybody can have the technical skills to work in fast food as long as you have 2 hands and 2 feet.
Sounds right.
And then from there, it's like, what's the separating factor that has like a director? So one of the 8 people who's running the store, right? It's that understanding of vision and values and being able to understand the deeper business concepts and being willing to apply yourself to it. So showing up to work on time, maybe putting in extra hours. That's often a thing that happens. And willing to learn and break out of your comfort zone while also being committed to quality. And they saw these traits in me. And so they were like, we would like you to join our 1.5 to 2 year program roughly to be a director at the store. Directors at my specific location make close to 6 figures. Not always. It depends on the year because they have overtime or whatever, right? Overtime plays a big role in some of that. But yeah, so I had the opportunity to do that and I was in that for a while. And I learned a lot of business concepts. And then recently I've had a thing of, I think I want to do something closer to what my degree is related to.
Yeah.
So Chick-fil-A is a business. It's great. And there's a lot of people there, but I want to be able to dig into deeper with people on why they're doing what they're doing. Or having like substantial impacts with people who don't have a lot of money, or to help coach people like myself who haven't come from much, but have been able to build a life out of nothing. So whether that's working as a financial aid advisor, because I figured my way around financial aid in university and how to pay for things, while also being able to live on the other side. Or like a career counselor, what are your opportunities? How can you maybe do a study abroad program, see how things are done somewhere else? Or everything from like 2 summers ago, I spent the summer with this organization called Service Over Self. They re-roof houses for people in underserved neighborhoods in Memphis, Tennessee. And these people can't afford to re-roof their house. And so their house is leaking and they're maybe on the older side, so they can't get up on a roof and fix it. And shingles are expensive. And so they bring out these college students and they teach high school students for 6 weeks in the summer and they redo the whole roof for them. And it's not quite the same as a professional, but it's waterproof and the rain droplet does not drop into the roof. And if it is fixed,
a big issue.
They go and fix it after. But then 90% of the work is done and these kids pay to come to camp and are basically paying for the roof while they're there, while also getting an amazing experience learning about racial discrimination that's happened. A lot of it is religion focused, so religious values and stuff, and just have a great time with like ping pong or volleyball or whatever.
Also learning a skill which actually pays, especially when AI is all over around. If you have a skill that you can fall back onto and do roofs as a side gig, that will also keep you fed, right? Exactly.
Which they're not going to, most of them aren't going to go into roofing professionally, but it's like, okay, like oftentimes like trades things or construction things in terms of doing the actual labor is looked down upon in Western society or something, right? Because, you have to do all the hard labor or something. When actually they can be very profitable, especially now, like an electrician can make just as much as somebody who has a college degree.
Oh yeah.
And even more because there's demand for it, right? Money follows where demand is.
I know a guy who graduated as an architect and just as a backup, he got like a 6-month course, I believe, in being an electrician. And being an electrician, he makes 80 to 100K a year, while with his architecture degree, he would make between 30 and 35.
Yeah, exactly. So service over self, I had that experience, and I've been for 2 spring breaks. So having something where you can really tangibly affect somebody's life. Like when you finish that roof, you know that this is going to last them 10 to 12 years. And it's a difference that, not everybody's going to step in to fill or sacrifice their summer for. And so to do something like that on a wider scale, I don't think that, for me at least, you can't put a price on the impact that makes on somebody's life and the difference between them being able to flourish and not flourish.
People come to that desire very often at a bit of an older age. Why do you think did you come to that in your 20s to want to do it's not charity, it's something else, right? What's the best way to call it?
I mean, it's
helping other people, right?
Yeah.
That's what it is.
I mean, a big part of how these values function is how you're raised. My parents had a very intensive focus on those sorts of things. And also so for example, when tours would visit us in Israel or Cyprus, they would stay in our house. My parents, they wouldn't just have us stay out of the way in the other room. They would have us help make breakfast in the morning. Like there was a couple times, and maybe I shouldn't say this on camera, but there was a couple times that my dad would be on a trip and my mom would have to go to the baptismal site in the morning. And so we wouldn't be there. And me and my sisters, we got up, we made breakfast for these guests. We served them at the table. And we helped them get a good start to their morning. And if they had a question, we could answer a question because we had been around and knew.
Yeah.
But that requires real responsibility and ownership. And
that's 14, 15, right?
Yeah. In Israel it was before that because I was 13 at that point. So even from the age of 10, 11, 12, these are things of okay, when somebody walks in the door, hi, my name is Josiah. It's very nice to meet you. It's these things of service and care, and genuinely wanting to know how somebody else is doing. That's where a lot of good people skills come from. You can fake some of it, but ultimately people can detect if you're being deceptive or not, unless you're really good at deception, right? Yeah, exactly. And even then, sometimes you can kind of pick up on it if you're well trained. But when you have those things pushed in on you at a young age, then it becomes part of who you are. So I wouldn't if I'd attribute it to something, it would be to that, which I'm fully thankful for, because that's a big reason why I owe so much of my success, because, it's not just about me living, it's about bringing up the people around me who I can serve or be with. And that can be in multiple ways, either financially driving them to work. So there was a guy at my workplace that his car broke down. He didn't have enough to buy another one. I drove across town and back for 3 to 6 months, even when I wasn't going to that side, just to get him to work on days that I even wasn't working. It's I don't know. It's always hard to attribute where those things come from. And so I think some of it is when you're modeled, and where we were at, there were other people who were doing that things too, because people with like minds tend to go close together. And so when you're seeing that from your parents and from other people in the community, and you're also shown the hard parts of society in life, the people who don't make enough to make ends meet, or are struggling, or are looked down upon, then all of a sudden you can empathize and understand their struggle in a way that you wouldn't be able to if you haven't lived through that with them. And that's why I think it's challenging, because in Western society, not everybody goes through that. Some people have lives that are very comfortable, and you can do it to an extent, but sometimes you just have to volunteer yourself to get down and be with them and live with them for a little bit. Again, diversify your friend group and the people you interact with to truly understand it. Then that creates an empathy that's, it feels different than anything I can kind of put to words almost.
Because what you're doing is also very rare. You are essentially declining a 6-figure position to do something that won't get you that financial stability, but instead you will really make an impact on what is hopefully a large number of people over many, many years that you do it.
Yeah.
And of course, I think we talked about it before, there's a potential that if it's ever needed, you can fall back on it, but it's not like a guarantee, because right now you were offered this job to go into, is that director, right? Is the position?
Yeah, director.
How many years did it take you from like what you said, getting $8 an hour to being able to get a 6-figure job at Chick-fil-A?
Yeah. So I've spent 3 total years with Chick-fil-A, but I was offered it soon into my position. So really I was offered the position at like 17 to 18 months of having worked in Chick-fil-A. Now, I don't think I would have been offered exactly the same thing at my old location. And there's no guarantee that a new location I might join might offer me. And since I've kind of stepped out of it, if I tried to go back to it at my old location, they might be a lot more skeptical, right? Yeah. But regardless, you can't replace that experience. And so, part of it is motivated by a desire to help people. And then also part of it is motivated, because theoretically I could help people at Chick-fil-A. I can educate my team members around me or something and could bread a bunch of chicken in 3 hours and give it to hundreds of people.
What did you say you and your friend do? Is it 1 million chickens that you produce?
It's something, so like every chicken for Chick-fil-A produces 12 nuggets, 2 strips, and 2 fillets. And so if we waste 24 nuggets, 2 chickens have died. Usually, for catering, some days I've breaded 2,000 nuggets in just a couple hours.
Yeah.
And so 2,000 nuggets, you divide that by 12. Even if you take 10, that's 200 chickens.
In what?
In 2 hours.
In 2 hours.
Yeah. And so let's say you do it, I don't know, we probably go through 300 chickens. If I did the math correctly before, 300 to 500 chickens in 3 hours. Wow. And I am technically gifted enough at this point to do that all by myself.
Wow.
And that's hand dipping all the fillets in the milk wash and then pressing them into the coater, then putting it behind you, and doing that to a high quality of okay, if the coater is too thick, then it's not going to cook right and it's going to look raw, or the coater won't be finished. And so then it's going to taste bad. And so you have to have a thin layer of coater, which means on top of that, you have to sift it.
You know what you're doing.
all this stuff, right? I am the chicken.
So I just wanted to highlight that in 18 months, you got in a position where you got offered another 18-month program to, what is probably, is it it must be a 1 percentile salary, right? In the US. It must be that.
No, it's probably top 20%, maybe.
I think it's much
I would have to
than
double
that.
check. You have doctors and lawyers who are making over 100K.
There's few.
Let's say that you just use a model of Chick-fil-A, right?
Yeah.
You have the owner, which might not be a millionaire, but maybe close to the 1%. Who knows? I don't know.
Owner, not of the chain, but of that specific
location.
Yeah.
Of that franchise. Yeah. Because the chain takes a certain amount of the profit, as you might expect.
Yeah, as a franchise do.
So you have the owner who, let's just say, for example, they're the 1%, and then you have the directors, which there's 8 of them, which if you have 9 total people from that top percentage out of 100 people who work at the store, that's the top 10%. I would say that there's a bunch of other there's construction workers. I know a guy who makes $30 an hour, which is almost double what I make, and he's just a laborer, and then he'll do over 40 hours a week. So he's making more than me, but he's just a construction worker.
Right.
And that would be probably close to 70K a year. But yeah, so 100K, if I had to guess, was maybe top 25%, but I would have to check. I think median salary in the US is 69K or 67K, if I remember correctly, but I would have to double check, and that figure might have changed over the last couple of years.
Right.
And you use median over mean because mean includes all the 1% earners who earn millions or billions of dollars.
Yeah. And people that don't work as well, which probably shouldn't count all that much.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Anyway, that's a point being that it's pretty cool. It's not common.
Yeah,
it's not common to get above the median salary in 3 years, and also to turn away from that to something else. That's very respectable, and it's also a bit crazy, man.
Yeah. There's a lot of people around me at least, or say that, you can't just work your way up the chain. Because the common narrative with America is you can work all the way up from nothing to wherever, right? As an immigrant or whatever, which there's a lot of dispute about that now. Is it probably helpful that I could stay with somebody that provided me a home that was only a mile away from a workplace that I could get? Yes. And it was definitely helpful that they knew the owners, probably. Yes. Is maybe my skin color helpful because that's the predominant skin color of the country that I'm in? Probably, yeah. Those are things that a sociologist thinks about when they're analyzing my success. But there's also 100 other people in that store like me that aren't doing the same thing, that didn't do the same things that I did. And some of those people don't do that because they don't have the work ethic in terms of willing to stay late because they're tired or whatever. And maybe they didn't grow up with that work ethic. Or maybe they don't get the values the same way that I've been able to in terms of like caring about serving people in a really genuine and authentic way. Or maybe they just have alternate things, like they don't have a car, so they have to pay for Uber. And so maybe that's why they have to get back or something, right? Or they're tired because their home life isn't great. But I mean, ultimately at the end of the day, you have to wake up and decide, who am I going to be today? Mm-hmm. And in a moment, you have to decide, am I going to be frustrated in this moment? And in order to push into success, I think you really have to be willing to do things that you're not used to and do them not afraid, or at least with a healthy fear. Because the fear of failure is what stops a lot of people. And the fear to suffer is also what stops a lot of people.
Delayed gratitude, right?
Yeah, delayed gratification. Yeah. And like...
Gratification, that's
yeah,
right.
I went through university, which I had the opportunity to do, obviously, because it was provided for. But I don't think that would have changed how I would have gone about things professionally. I would have just worked a little bit more, right? But a lot of that, because I did it that way and because I worked 40 hours a week as well as doing school, that meant that like my social life wasn't very. Oh yeah,
you've done a lot of sacrifice
and I'm not
for it, definitely.
super. And then I wasn't super happy all the time, or I was exhausted, and I would just like be by myself, or I would see my friends like once a week, maybe, if that, or I'd see them briefly with my roommates. And so like even now at this point with Muncie, like I have a lot of people that I know because I've done a lot of different things, whether it was debate through school, whether it was board game club or a board game group, or whether it was just people at work.
Football also that you play.
I know a lot of people, but not all those relationships are super deep, right? And so once you get to that point, then now I'm at a point where like the people that I've come with have kind of made their groups post-college, or they have their work groups because I haven't had a lot of social time. And so it's been hard to like adjust into those. And so kind of going back to some of what kicked some of this off in terms of changing careers is I only have experience in the food industry. And so you never know whether you're going to fit somewhere else better or live happier if you don't try something that might not make you happier. And so to get a different type of work experience, I want to go to Memphis for an internship. And then also with that is I have a lot of the people that I worked with a couple summers ago who are moving back after either moving back after uni from having lived there, or have moved there to get jobs with an organization or a similar one. And so I have the opportunity to be a part of a new blossoming community of people who already kind of know each other, but can live and coexist in a very cohesive bubble that isn't like divided into work and school and church and whatever it is, right? And those are the two things that are most appealing to me is, okay, new work experience. I also get to serve people like I am now to an extent, but maybe to a bigger extent. And also be able to be a part of a new community that's blossoming with new social opportunities and new insights to different lifestyles.
I also want to get your view on something because you're in a very unique like position where you are an American individual, but you visited over 20 countries, not only as a tourist, but you lived in some places, you were considering moving to some places, you are, whenever you, like right now you're visiting London, and it's not just seeing the Big Ben and the Buckingham Palace, you're interacting with the locals. So you're really like diving into these different cultures whenever you travel. So talk a little bit about the differences in culture that you have found US and the other places that you visited to be both like from a work point of view, from a life point of view, from a values point of view. I think that would be very interesting, especially for me, because like me and my partner were sometimes always looking into the US as a potential place to move over to, which by the way, a lot of podcasters always do. So that would fit the theme. Everyone's basically in Austin by this point. But anyway, so what are some things that you found to be different for you from values point of view? Talk about it.
So like I consider Israel and Cyprus in the Middle East. So that's where I have the most living experience. But then most of the 20 countries I've been to is Southern and Eastern Europe, and a little bit of Western Europe. And it's always interesting when I get this question because I have an American accent. I grew up homeschooled in our house where we really only engaged with each other. And so we were in the Middle East and still celebrating Thanksgiving. And so you go to buy a turkey on Thanksgiving and they don't have 1 million like you do in America. So there's these things of like we're participating in an alternate culture, but also still preserving our initial culture and the things we do, like celebrating Christmas or maybe celebrating Christmas or Easter originally. But you also have to adopt the new culture that you're going into. So in Israel, we engaged with a lot of Jewish people, so we'd celebrate Jewish holidays. But like I was on an Israeli soccer team with Jews, Arabs, Druze people, and that's like three.
Sorry, who are Druze?
Druze, it's so I think they're like a Circassian sect, which they faced persecution. I don't remember. I think it was maybe Turkey or maybe farther north.
All right, cool.
And they were driven out, and so then they ended up just settling in Israel because Israel provided a place for them.
Okay. Yeah.
Essentially. So there was like that little pocket. And so growing up at the intersection of a lot of these different cultures, you get slightly different experiences, but like all of them eat olives and some use pita and some use what's the Arab flatbread? I don't remember it off the top of my head. But
I know exactly what you mean. I can't remember it now.
It's kind of lemony.
Yes.
Yeah. It's fantastic. I'm blanking on the name. But America has this very Western thing of like individualistic lifestyle. There's so much space. You have standalone fast food restaurants, and cities are big and spread out because we all have a car. And that's like and work is just like takes up 50% to 70% of your week. And that's very different from the Middle East, which is like, if I get back to you in 4 weeks when I should have been 2, it's okay.
Yeah.
And like, that's nothing wrong with that. They make that work, right? It's just a different, more laid back style in even business and work. And then you have these very collectivist family lifestyles where grandma's living with us and I'm living with my parents for now, or maybe we're not living together, but we're living in the same town. Right. And, I don't want to drive more than 20 minutes to go to a city versus in America. Hey, we'll drive 4 hours just for kicks on a Sunday and drive 4 hours back. Like even in the UK, you don't do that. It's like, oh my gosh, I have to drive 3 hours to go to Liverpool. How dare I? Exactly. You're insane. Like there's things like that in terms of the sacrifices you're willing to make and the people that you're engaging with. And so then like the Middle East is sometimes more like a Midwestern town in the States of like where, everybody lives in the town and everybody knows everybody. And maybe you go to college and then you come back to the town, you live in the town and then you die there. And then your kids do the same thing over and over and over again. Right. The difference with that is in America, everybody who's coming through that town is American. In the Middle East, like in Cyprus, for example, you have the Cypriots who are there and they speak a dialect of Greek and all this stuff, but then like they have South Africans living there. They have Asian and Chinese people who are moving there and then moving out, and they have the Brits that are still there and the expats that have gone there for retirement, and they have South Africans there, and all of a sudden not everybody has the same culture as you and the same holidays that you're growing up with. So all of a sudden you're embracing these whole new ways of thinking about things and maybe different religions. And so this just really opens your perspective in how people can function and how things can happen, right? American cities might be closer to this, but even then a lot of the people there are still American because American immigration laws are very restrictive, right?
Yeah.
And so then that makes it hard. It's cool when it happens, when there's pockets there. But then we just go to our little pockets and we don't intermingle as much, I would say. So like when you have this influx of cultures, it changes you in ways that you don't always expect. And all of a sudden you become more open-minded to who you're engaging with and how you're engaging with them. One of the common things I like to say is like food, like the food is a lot fresher here. Because in America, kind of going back to work stuff, it's like corporation-based, big corporations that span the whole country, right?
I heard a lot of things about food.
It's feel like, at least for me personally, food in America feels a lot less healthy. Fast food is way more common. And then this fast food is mass produced and they have all these different chemicals and additives. And like people will say this is natural, but like you'll look at a list of ingredients on a bag of Lay's chips in the US and it'll have like 25 ingredients. And then I look at it in the UK and there's 5.
Yeah. Isn't there something about like the list of EU allowed ingredients is like 6 or 7 or 800, and then US is 15,000.
Yeah. So like, for example, Chick-fil-a uses monosodium glutamate in their spicy chicken sandwich,
right,
from the coder. I think it's monosodium glutamate. It's either that or a different ingredient, but essentially this one ingredient is banned in the EU. So Chick-fil-a is now coming to the UK, which they just opened their first place, I think in November, maybe slightly earlier. Because the UK isn't a part of the EU and they found either a way to change the ingredients or make it more accessible to people here. Now, part of that was also Chick-fil-A was very American focused, but still there's like barriers around ingredients. And they had to change the recipe.
Why US does it? I know we're pivoting a bit to a different topic, but do you know why? Like, is it just a commercial thing? Is it just that it makes money really well?
I mean, like MSG specifically is like an additive that makes you more addicted to the food or willing to come back to it. Yeah. And so I think there's different things like this. Like, for example, people are a lot of people don't like what Kennedy has done as Trump appointed him as I forget the Secretary of Health. The
medical guy, yeah.
Basically changing some medical things. And it's like they just banned red dye from candies. And so companies have like 2 years to get rid of red dye out of these candies or use something else. Like that's in your M&Ms, that's in your Skittles, that's in like all these different candies. Dye? It was linked to different health problems.
Interesting.
And like you see the effects of this because America has really high obesity rates. And like there's still a lot of people that work out and do stuff, right? But we still have like some of the highest obesity rates, and we have really bad rates around general health and wellness stuff. But I forget it. Like it's I think we have higher rates on cancer, if I remember correctly, and it's a couple other things. But basically, or like autism too. That's really bad in the States compared to other countries. And so it's not directly maybe linked to food, or at least some people try to link into vaccines or whatever, right? But it has something to do with the culture that we have.
Yeah.
And we don't know exactly all of the stuff. We just have potential indicators of what it is.
Indicators. Like autism is an interesting one because I've looked up a statistic from one source which said that autism is at an all-time high. Mm-hmm. And then another journal which said that the autism is recognized more than ever. Mm-hmm. And one argues that there are actually more people with it, while the other one argues that now it's clinically diagnosed more times correctly. Yeah. So yeah, it's very interesting how we don't exactly know. We just can guess with various indicators.
Well, it's definitely recognized more no matter what. because people know the signs and to look for things like this, right? Or like ADHD is another one. Very.
I think actually it was ADHD that I was looking at.
Yeah. But like a lot of them fall into some of the same categories, just with different nuances, right? Not necessarily a spectrum because they're different disorders, like with it, but
a lot of these things have a spectrum where not just the extreme can be labeled, but also something more mild.
There is some people even, and I somewhat subscribe to this, to labeling theory as well, which
What's
is
labeling. What's
labeling theory. I'm pretty sure it's sociological, but I might have saw it on a different podcast. But essentially, like, all right, we like to put labels to things, and so if something fits in the label or close to it, then we put it under the label. But then, like, once we have a label on it, then we kind of identify ourselves under characteristics of that label, right? So if I'm American, that's part of my identity, and that's a label I'm putting on myself. And so then I'm going to do things that are ascribed to like American culture, right?
Yeah.
Because I've put X label on it. And so sometimes, like, if something looks like something, we put a label on it or something, right? Or we have to have a label for everything. So every specific.
And you're saying that influences our behavior if you identify as something?
Yeah.
This reminds me of a manipulative technique I was listening to from this I don't think he's a neuropsychologist because he's without a degree, but he talks a lot about like neurohacking. And Hugh Chase, his name is. And he talked about how if you give people a choice of 3 options, one that is very negative, the other that is very different from them, and the third that describing them. And the third that is similar to them, but adding something that you would want them to do. For example, if you're a real estate agent and you're trying to sell a house, right? That's what you want to do as a real estate agent. And when walking with your clients, you say, that you believe and you were taught by some very high authority university, name drop professor or like Harvard, and you say you found out that there are only 3 types of clients. Clients that never end up buying the property because they are always unsure about everything. They always kick the decision down to a later timeline. They don't like anything, and they never end up making the purchase that would inevitably like change their life. The second type are the types of people that delay, also to an unreasonable extent until it's too late. And that type of person is just unsure about themselves, and therefore they're going to ask questions and questions and questions. And eventually, by the time they may decide, it will be way too late because a year has passed and the house is probably off the market. And the third type of person, which comes in and finds the property that they're looking for, and after deciding on 1 or 2 things that is important to them, doesn't worry too much about the tiny details that can easily be fixed, and ends up buying the house. And so here's what you've done. You've outlined a negative person and perhaps a person that you're trying to, in a sense, manipulate, saying, well, I'm not the first type of person. I'm also definitely not the second type of person. The first one, because I don't want to be him. The second time, it doesn't sound like me. I think I'm falling into that third category. But now you sprinkled a little bit of that third type of people, and assuming that there are only 3 types, that's what you said from an authoritative source. That third type of person doesn't worry too much about the tiny details that can be fixed later down the line. And I don't exactly know the justification of it, to be honest, but various studies have shown that like little manipulation tactic works incredibly well when it comes to like fixing someone's identity to do what you want. And like it's something crazy like 80% less people were asking those like little questions, and then they'd done the exact same study with a different input that they wanted to change. Can't remember the exact thing, but you put 3 categories in front of you. If a person decides that they are category C, it seems like they do really act like that category C, assuming that you put a box and they believe in that box, that there are only 3 categories that exist. Reminds me a lot of what you're saying. If you identify as an American, you start acting like it, right? That's where you were going.
Well, it's like an interesting that thing that I've thought about is like when you introduce yourself to somebody, what do you say? You say, my name's Maxim. That's a label. That's who you are, right? Or my name's Josiah. And then you say like your occupation. So then all of a sudden you have a label on what you do.
Yeah.
And then you have a label on your hobby. So what do I like to do for my hobby? And so people in these different social groups, going back to sociology, people in these different social groups have different patterns of what they do within these. And so we use these labels as descriptors, as quick descriptors of what we're doing. And so then you're generally more inclined to act within those, which is why, for example, like I don't always, like my accent gives away that I'm American, right? So, but sometimes like when I'm there, I caveat to people like, yeah, I'm American, but half of my life has been spent outside of America. Yeah. So, you know, I don't know Chuck E. Cheese's, which is like this arcade where a bunch of people went to birthday parties and they have games or whatever, right? I didn't go to an American high school, so I don't love the American sports system there where it's cool that you can play 4 different sports in a year, but like, what if I just really love one sport and want to play that all year, right?
Yep.
There's some opportunities, right? Or like, you know, there's memes of like the dumb American, right? Or the American who's like super patriotic, right? And it's like those aren't necessarily me. And it's not that I don't have struggle moments with intelligence in different areas. And it's not that I don't have, and it's not that I'm not patriotic. It's just that like, I'm not what you're thinking in your head.
You don't have to subscribe to the whole thing.
Yeah, I don't have to subscribe to the whole thing. And this is a big thing that I like to not necessarily educate people on, but just open their mind to, in terms of like these labels kind of restrict how we think about somebody and what they're doing. And so I like to take the time to break it down. And the more you break down some of the labels on what color you are or what religion you are or whatever, right? This opens opportunities to get to know somebody for the individual that they are and the culmination of what these different interests and aspects about them brings to be them, rather than grouping them into these big social groups, which may include them as a person who's within that, but not reflective. And so this is like with sociological studies, a lot of the time you'll have these things where you specifically look at, okay, they look at, if I'm trying to study a specific race, you can't just do everybody. You have to narrow it to economic status or different jobs or whatever, right? You use multiple different variables to research these specific things about people. But yeah, so that it kind of loops back around to what we were talking about with, you know, being different as being an American who's lived overseas and been to 20 countries. It's like those things like food or like architecture. Like I love European architecture and historical sites that America just doesn't have. Like there's buildings in London that are older than my country.
There are chairs in London that are older than your country.
Exactly. Like that's just a completely different dynamic. And
I've seen this movie, and this Brit was trying to roast a girl that came from the US, and she was saying something along the lines of, the woman that sits on a chair older than her country decides to, and then like, amazing.
Yeah,
you were saying that historical sites and things like that, not.
Yeah, it's just interesting.
Although US has an incredible history itself, like studying, going down that rabbit hole is also very fascinating. It's just a bit younger.
Yeah, it's a lot packed into 250 years, and you know, it's interesting because like it's interesting to see a culture that has been around for not as long and developed itself, because we've had the ability to analyze that and look at the history books, because people have become more literate, like right before and going into America being a country. And so we're seeing actively the rise and potentially fall of an empire, just like the rise and fall of the Roman Empire and empires before that, right? And we see these patterns through all these different things, even the rise and fall of the British Empire and colonialism, right?
Yeah.
We see these patterns of different things where these countries come out right away with an ideology, and then everybody gets behind the ideology and they have a way of living, and then they do all these things, and then a bunch of people, what you're doing is wrong, or we hate you, because the people in power then get it corrupt, and then everything falls apart and society breaks itself down and rebirths itself into something new with facets of what was before, but also different things. And, you know, you don't want to advocate for the whole reconstruction of a society, but at some point, if you don't stop moving, then you're going to die. Right. Yeah. It's like, it's this thing of, I've said this before with you, but it's like, you're only living if you have a heartbeat, and the heartbeat, it goes, but-um. And so there's a high and a low. And so you have this rise and fall, but if you're flatlining, you're dead. And so if nothing is changing, then you're going to go away, right? And something new is going to take its place. But it's also important to preserve what we've learned. So to look at what has worked. And so this is where, like, people say it's conservative and progressive, but it's an important balance that you have to ride the middle of that, where we do have to keep progressing. We have to keep evolving in how we interact with other people and how we take care of them, and how we focus on those different groups, right? But we also have to say, you know, there's things that we've tried in the past that hasn't worked, but there is a lot of things that we've tried that has worked, and things like technology, right? And literature and different things like this that we have to preserve going forwards. Or things like free speech or different things like that, right? Things that we know that have worked to help develop people, to encourage ideas. And so we do have to move forward with maybe restrictions or the breaking down of walls that have existed. But that doesn't mean you have to get rid of the whole wall, and maybe you can still keep the foundation.
Throw some examples around if you can.
Yeah, I mean, the most clear example that I can think of off my head is slavery, right?
Right.
So for
That's
all
an example.
I know, and this is a hot topic, but I like to desensitize people to it, and so I won't spend too long on it. And I can
No. Go ahead. I just didn't expect that to be.
But yeah, but like for pretty much all of human history, major civilizations have owned slaves.
Yeah.
And it's not always based on race. It's just been based on whoever they've conquered, right? Because it's been in Africa, and it was in Africa before Europe, and it's also been in Europe, and it's been in Asia as well, right?
Oh yeah.
And so it's been everywhere, right? But we recognize now that that's not the best way to treat people.
Yeah.
And we all can agree on that.
Yeah.
And it's sad to see regressions in that, like Afghanistan. Like Afghanistan has just instituted a 4-class system where women are basically put at the bottom, and there's like basically slavery happening there.
Yeah, I heard something about it.
Which is super sad to see, right? But we can recognize these things and say, okay, we need to progress to move past this, right? And so we still need workforce, right? But we have to treat them with dignity and respect, which is the progressive thing, right? And so we have to figure out a way on how to organize society so that everybody's taken care of, and so that we still get things done.
So that's the argument for progressiveness.
Yeah.
And if I understood, like your narrative correct, we have to have a middle line between progressiveness, but also preserving some things that actually are of value. So would the example here be, for example, not going but that probably doesn't work.
Like,
with
okay,
example,
so
right?
for example, a simple one would be like, okay, we invented the wheel, and so you keep the wheel, that way we can transport each other easier, right? Or you keep cars, but you make them electric, right?
Right.
And so with slavery, that would be, okay, we have to move past this, right? And so we preserve that we need to move past this because it's wrong, right? And so then now the conservative, not conservative, but that like saying, okay, keep what you've learned, right? Is we're keeping this, or we're keeping X pieces of technology.
I guess a conservative thing could be that books. We still have to build things, right?
Yeah. Or
we
like
just have
education.
to figure out another way of doing it, not with a slave power, but by hiring people and still like building houses, growing in the cities. That's the conservative part, that we shouldn't stop all developments just because we got rid of it, right?
Yes,
something like that?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And and so it's this fine balance of these different things and how you handle these issues. And so, you know, whenever every system that humans make, there's going to be wrong things with it, right? And so we're just slowly refining over time. And the problem is, every time you dig deeper into something, you find a new problem that you have to solve. Like in science, it happens all the time. Like, you know, at first you think, oh, this is just wood. And then all of a sudden this is matter and has cells. And then all of a sudden, oh, there's something smaller than cells. And then there's something smaller than an atom, and that's a quark. And so now we're in quantum mechanics, right? But you do these things on a progressive, and a lot of people just look at like science as things that does stuff like that, but it also happens in culture.
Yeah. Interesting.
It's just a different method. But since culture is so subjective a lot of the time, and it's not necessarily objective like science, we don't necessarily look at it that way.
And it's a different lens to view problems through, not on a physical level, but on a, sociological level.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
Josiah, thank you so much for coming over. It's such a pleasure to do this with you. I think we had some very interesting and insightful discussions.
Indeed.
Anything you want to say before we wrap this thing up?
Never stop pursuing knowledge. Never assume that you're always right. And be willing to have an open mind and explore the fear of failure, the fear of suffering, because that's what's going to lead you to find the things that you love and are going to make you prosperous.
That's beautiful. Thank you for this.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Goodbye, everyone.